Imagine this. You go to the shelves of your favorite pharmacy and you want to buy an over-the-counter medication that your doctor suggested or Dr. Google suggested. You know the brand name, so could be Tylenol, Advil, Aleve, and any other brand name that you know. And right next to it, on that same shelf, is a generic brand, maybe the store brand, whether it's CVS brand or Kirkland for Costco. And it appears to be the same medication, but at 1/3 of the price. You take the two boxes, you turn to the back, and you compare the ingredients. The ingredients appear to be exactly the same. Same, very long name of whatever ingredient it is, the same dosage, exactly the same. Which one do you buy? Well, most people will buy the brand name. And in this episode, I'll explain why right after this. Welcome to The Trust Show. I'm Yoram Solomon, your host, the author of the Book of Trust, and facilitator of the Trust Habits Workshop. My mission is simple. I want to help you form habits that build your trustworthiness, because the answer to this question will have the biggest impact on your personal and professional success or failure. Can I trust you? The title of this episode has the word or the phrase trust premium, which I have trademarked recently. And to kind of explain the principle of trust premium, people will buy from people they trust. I mean, I don't have to explain this too much to you, hopefully, because you do the same thing. You buy from people that you trust or from brands that you trust. People buy from people they trust, and I call this the trust preference. Okay, so trust preference is, with everything else being equal, including the price, what is the probability you're going to buy from someone you trust over someone that you don't know, not over someone that you specifically distrust, because that can be an infinite higher probability, but from somebody you don't know. So there are two entities, one you don't know, one that you trust. What is the probability you're going to buy from the one that you trust? And trust preference I found it to be, in fact, in no case I found it to be less than 90%. 90% probability you're going to buy from somebody that you trust. Typically, it's in the high 90 percentiles. So that's the trust preference. The trust premium is the fact that people are actually willing to pay a premium when they buy from someone or something or a brand that they trust. Now, how do you measure that? To me, the point that I'm interested in is when the probability is 50-50, that you're going to buy from the one you trust over the one you don't know. When do we reach 50-50? Because the one you trust can raise their price until they get to, obviously, the higher they raise their price, the lower the probability we buy from them until we hit that 50-50 mark. And I wanted to know, when do we hit the 50-50 mark? What is that number? And I started doing the trust premium research, and I found in some cases, take financial advisors, for example, that number is close to 40%, 39.4%. People are willing to buy from or are willing to pay 39.4% higher fees to a financial advisor that they trust over someone they don't know. So there is a premium here that people are willing to pay for somebody that they trust. And I'm going to claim that there is an inherent trust in a brand. Typically, sometimes there is an inherent distrust in a brand. But in order to explain this, I'm going to have to start with there is a phrase that you probably heard, and it's something that's etched into our brains, and it's that you get what you paid for. Or in other words, the higher you pay, the higher the perceived value of what you get. So you believe you're getting more value when you pay more. And it goes along the lines of another statement that you probably heard. There is no such thing as a free lunch. If somebody offers something for free, it must have zero value. I have to tell you, by the way, from personal experience, I have done a workshop many years ago, and I decided that since I wanted to have many, many people attend that, because it was the first time I did that workshop, that I'm not going to charge anything. Well, when I didn't charge anything, people actually did not show up. The percentage of those who registered and did not show up was pretty high. And the reason was, one of the reasons I should say, is that people thought, I get what I paid for, and there is no such thing as a free lunch. So either I'm going to try and convince them to do something at the end, and that's why I'm offering it for free, or it has no value, and that's why it's offered for free. Years later, I did another workshop, and this time I was willing to do it for free, but I decided I'm not going to do it simply because I'm going to charge. And people perceive that if they paid, it has value, or if I charged, it has value. And sure, the audience was much smaller. The number of people who registered was much smaller. Only one person paid and did not show up. And by the way, I only charged $275 for a full day thing, and only one person did not show up. In one of my recent survey studies, I asked the question, to what degree do you agree or disagree with the statement, you get what you paid for? And I explained that means that the more you have to pay, the more you believe you get value. Well, it was actually pretty interesting, the results. Because what I found was that 61% agreed with that statement, that you get what you paid for. 61% of those who were asked, and this was close to 400 people, I believe, 61% said that they agree that you get what you paid for. Now, the 61% were broken. 10% strongly agreed with that. 21% generally agreed. 29% somewhat agreed. There's 19% in the middle who said neutral, and a total of 20% who disagreed with the statement that you get what you paid for. Of them, only 1% strongly disagreed with that statement. 5% generally disagreed. 14% somewhat disagreed. So in general, we agree with that statement. I mean, we really agree with the statement that you get what you paid for. Another thing that was etched into our brains, I know that my wife tells me that her mother told her many times, I'm not rich enough to buy something cheap. And I guess the statement there is, if something is cheap, it must probably require a lot of service and a lot of fixes, and it's going to break and whatever, because it's cheap. I mean, it's, once again, you're associating this with the fact that it's cheap. Versus if you spend enough money on something, then you're probably not going to have to fix it. So I guess the statement says that if you buy something cheap, you're going to end up spending more money on it later. You know what? To some extent, it's true, because my younger daughter's first car, I bought her first car, and I bought a pretty cheap car. Seemed to have low mileage. God knows if anybody messed with the mileage or the odometer, and it was relatively old. So I'm trying to think. I think the year that she got that car was maybe 2016, 17. This was a 10, 11-year-old car. It was a 2006. And you know what? I had to replace the air conditioner compressor. I had to replace shock absorbers. And there were just things with this car that I kept on spending money on it. That at some point I started asking myself, should I have bought a new car? And guess what? Her next car was a new car, and my older daughter's next car was a new car as well. And this comes from that statement, you're not rich enough to buy cheap. Another thing that, especially if you're in the IT department, another statement that you probably have heard is that nobody ever got fired for choosing IBM. And the whole idea behind that statement is that imagine that you're the IT manager and you need to buy something that on one hand, a company like IBM, doesn't have to be IBM, but somebody, an IBM, a Dell, a Sony, an Apple, a major brand name. But then there is another product from another company that's a non-brand, okay? And the ratio of value to price is better for this other product, and you make what seems to be a good economic decision, and then it blows back at you because that device that you bought breaks down. Doesn't mean that an IBM or a Dell or an Apple or anybody like that their product will not break down. But when your boss asks what happened, and obviously there has to be some kind of crisis as a result, and they find that you bought from a non-brand name, you're going to be in much deeper hot water or in trouble for choosing an unknown brand name as opposed to choosing IBM or Dell. So nobody ever got fired for choosing IBM. And finally, there's one more statement, and that's the devil that you know. You know this devil. I mean, do you love American Airlines? Maybe not, but you know them well enough compared to maybe another airline that flies for the same place in a better value or apparent perceived value to price ratio. So this is kind of how we think about brands, and this is why we have, and this is how it manifests itself, that we actually do have this preference towards a brand and even a willingness to pay a premium. Now let's explain what affects that premium. First of all, the premium is affected differently in different markets, in different industries. So, for example, if I take financial advisors versus independent insurance agents, two groups that I've done research on, trust premium research on, I found that while people are willing to pay almost 40% higher fees to a financial advisor they trust or someone they don't know, they're only willing to pay 5.5% higher premiums on an insurance policy when they buy it from an agent they trust versus an agent they don't know. So even the outcomes, the trust preference and the trust premiums are different in different industries. But what is it that affects it? So I found that there are several different components that would affect them, but perhaps the biggest one is the consequences. What do you have to lose if you made the wrong decision? One of the examples I give here is take surgery, and especially not surgery on yourself, but surgery on your child that you're very protective of. How much premium are you willing to pay to a surgeon that came very recommended and therefore trusted versus a surgeon you never heard of before and nobody told you or nobody recommended? Nobody said they're bad, but nobody recommended. What's the premium you're willing to pay that surgeon if you had the opportunity to pay that premium to have them operate something pretty critical, let's say brain surgery on your child, right? So there are the consequences. And another example that I give is actually from the area of photography. I recently gave several keynotes in photography conferences, professional photographers of America and then of Iowa. And take two different types of photographers, right? Or photography sessions. One is a studio session, maybe headshots, and the other is a wedding photography or wedding event or any other life-altering event. What is the premium you're willing to pay when you are signing up, when you're paying a studio photographer? I mean, again, I'm going back to the component of consequences. What's the worst thing that can happen, right? Well, the worst thing that can happen is that they mess up, you wasted time, you wasted money. If you can't get them to pay you back, You don't have the pictures when you need them. Maybe now you need to wait another week to go somewhere else to take headshots or studio photos. But that's it. Now think about a wedding photographer that messed up, right? Can you have the wedding again? I mean, you got a wedding with no pictures or no good pictures. That's much more terrible. So the consequences have a significant impact on your brand preference, okay? Or trust premium in general. There's also where does this play into your budget, okay? Because the smaller percentage of your budget that this is, the less sensitive you are for that price. So you're actually willing to pay a much higher premium. So for example, you need to replace light bulbs at home. You need to replace, let's say 100 light bulbs. Heck, I don't think that my house has 100 light bulbs and it's a pretty good size house. But let's say 100 light bulbs, and there is a light bulb that costs $1 and a light bulb that costs $2. And the consequences of choosing the wrong one is that you're going to be replacing light bulbs all the time because they burn out. Well, the difference is going to be between $100 and $200. And if this is an LED light bulb with an expected life cycle of 50 years, let's just agree that the probability that I'm going to have to replace a single one before I die is pretty low. So that part of the budget is going to be pretty small. So the impact of premium can be higher. The impact on premium can be higher. On the other hand, let's assume that you had to replace light bulbs every day or two or something. Well, then that's going to be much more significant because that means that you're going to have to spend $100 or $200 every 1 or 2 days. Now it's becoming a bigger part of the budget. So the consequences play a major role. Now, another role is whether this is a long or short-term relationship. And for example, when you think about buying sports shoes, I don't think that you're building a long-term relationship. I mean, if I bought Nike one day and I bought Adidas the next day, I didn't build a relationship with them. If you think about an airline, on the other hand, you do have a relationship with them. Am I 100% happy with American Airlines? No. I mean, you're not going to be 100% happy with, I think, any airline. But you know what? I have the loyalty program. The fact that I'm 6'1" and I get free access to seats that have a longer distance, a bigger leg room. That's important to me. So I am developing a long-term relationship. So now premium does play a role. So there are several different things that do affect the ratio between the risk and reward and the consequences, and the part of the budget obviously is the biggest one. So these are the types of things that affect the trust premium. So I'm going to say that we are worried about the consequences for the most part, and this is why we choose the brand. But why? Why would we believe that the brand is more trustworthy and therefore the consequences are going to be less severe if we're talking about negative consequences? Let's touch on the components of the 8 laws of trust and the 6-component relative trust model. Well, I'll start with number 5, the trust law number 5, transferable trust. There is a much higher likelihood that that people that you trust will recommend the brand over the non-brand. Simply because more people you trust know the brand. The brand is the brand because it's more known. That's the whole definition of brand. And even if the transferable trust, and to go back, law number 5, transferable trust is transferable, means that if you trust someone who trusts someone else, you are more likely to trust that someone else. And in this case, we're talking about the brand. You trust the brand because someone you trust trusts the brand and tells you about it. Even if we're not talking about quality, so close friends, people that you really do trust, but quantity, number of reviews, the probability that the brand will have a much higher number of reviews is much higher than if the non-brand, than the non-brand, because the non-brand is not as well known. So transferable trust works in favor of the brand to get to the starting point of trust, okay, of your own personal decision. So when you consider that other people have looked at that or have recommended and trust the brand, you're more likely to start by trusting the brand over the non-brand. Next, I'll go into the components of really the what you do rather than who you are. And you'll see how those affect who you are or what I believe you are. And I'm going to start with time. The brand has existed for much longer than the non-brand. In fact, you know a lot more about the brand than you know about the non-brand. You heard about them longer. And as a result, you built time. And you know, time, I use the example of would you sit in the backseat of a self-driving car when nobody's sitting in the front? Well, most likely you're not today. But you felt the same thing about cruise control until you spend enough time with it to say, I trust it now. You will be, I do believe that you will be in a position where you are going to trust self-driving cars enough to sit in the backseat when nobody is sitting in the front. You just need time. You have more time with brands and therefore you trust them more. Intimacy. Intimacy plays a major role in brand trustworthiness. And intimacy is typically achieved through their marketing and advertisement. The brands typically have advertised for longer, but have advertised more intimately. So if you think about it, the non-brand doesn't have that kind of money. You know, brands would have the money to spend on a Super Bowl ad, and that's in the millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars. Non-brand doesn't. So in a Super Bowl ad, you have a much more likelihood to encounter a Tylenol ad than a non-brand ad. They don't even try. And by the way, those ads, not only did they give you more intimacy with the brand, but they developed your perception of their competence. They develop the concept that your perception of symmetry, that they're on the same side as you are. The non-brand is not trying to tell you, hey, I'm here to fix you. I'm here to help you. They're not trying to. They're really trying to say, I'm cheaper. I'm the same, but I'm cheaper. Personality compatibility, by the way, sometimes happens through thing that's called a corporate social responsibility initiative. So, for example, a brand that says, for every shoe that you buy from us, we're going to donate shoes, one pair, to someone in need that can't afford shoes. And maybe that's one reason why you're going to buy from them. So sometimes that type of personality compatibility has an impact, but you only get that through your intimacy with the brand, and you get your intimacy with the brand because they keep communicating with you, whereas the non-brand does not. And this goes back into that whole statement of the devil you know. You know, even if you're not 100% sure that this is, that you trust them 100%, then you know them for long enough. And often we choose the devil we know. I have a friend in Israel. Her name is Amy Boney, and Amy is a divorce attorney. And she's a divorce attorney, and she's a speaker, and she has workshops on I think I would call it personal empowerment and crisis management. And she has her podcast, and I think the world of her. But you know, as a divorce attorney, one of the and she keeps writing stories. I actually included a story from her in the book of Trust. And her stories often talk about someone who stays with their spouse simply not in a healthy relationship, simply because it's the devil that they know. They would prefer to stay with someone they know over a new person, even if on paper or in first appearance appear to be better for them. So there's that component of the devil you know. The next part is that when you are trusting someone you don't know over the brand, you are taking a certain risk. And, if I go back to my research, one of the questions I asked is, to what degree do you agree with or disagree with the statement, I'm a risk taker. I'm willing to take risk. Well, what I found was that only 29% actually agreed that they are risk takers. And by the way, of those 29%, 2% said they strongly agree that they're risk takers. 8% said they generally agree. 20% said they somewhat agree. And yes, it does add to 30. This is a rounding issue. In fact, it's 29 if you really added the 3. 20% said that they somewhat disagree that they're risk takers, but only 10% said that they generally or strongly agree that they are risk takers. But 52% disagreed that they're risk takers. So in general, we are not risk takers. 13% of them said they strongly disagree that they're risk takers. 16% said they generally disagree. So just between those two, 29% said they generally or strongly disagree that they're risk takers. Another 23% said they somewhat disagree. And then 19% were right there in the middle. So we are not risk takers. If I go into the innovation adoption life cycle, so there's this model that has existed, I think, from the 1950s about innovation adoption cycle. So how do we adopt new things? And in new things, I'm really referring to things that are, not known, like they're not coming from a brand. And the way they distributed that was kind of a plus minus one standard deviation from the middle. So if you go to the lowest part of that, think of this cycle as looking like a bell curve, starts at 0, goes up to the maximum, and then goes back down to 0. So the first 16% are what you would call the early adopters. They actually broke those into 2.5% innovators, 13.5% of the total number of people in the market are the early adopters. And then 34% are the early majority, 34% the late majority, and then the last 16% are the laggards. Those are the ones that would buy when the product is already in the decline. And by the way, people have different perception and attitudes and being in different locations in that innovation adoption cycle in different industries and different types of products or services. But let me go back. The innovators, those 2.5%, those are the people who are going to buy it just because it's new. I don't know what it's good for. I don't know if I'm going to get any value out of it, but I'm going to buy it just because it's new. 13.5% are the early adopters. Those are the ones that say, I understand that I'm going to be the first, and but I can see the value, and I can see the ratio of value to price, and I really see how I can use that. I typically categorize myself here as early adopters, not as an innovator. I mean, I am an innovator, but here the definition of innovator is someone who buys stuff just because it's new, period, not really seeing the value yet. To me, I need to see the value, but I'm willing to be on the early side of things. And this ties very well to our unwillingness to take risk. We are not willing to take risk, and this is why only few people are early adopters. But that also means this is why this is why in general we prefer the brand. We trust the brand more than anyone else, more than the rest. That thing actually hurts startup companies. You know that I teach entrepreneurship at SMU, and one of the things that I tell my students is you are never going to get 1% of a market. I make a big deal out of it. One of my biggest pet peeves is when someone says all I need is 1% of the market. Nobody's giving you 1% of the market. If somebody's taking 99% of the market, that's the brand name in that market, then they're taking 100% of the market. Nobody's giving you 1%. So I always tell them, do something that's really unique and brings very unique value to a very unique set of customers, but you're going to have to provide a much, much better value to price ratio than what the brand name offers in the market. So whether it's dramatically lower price where it matters, but then again, you have to fight with this whole, you get what you paid for and there is no such thing as a free lunch. If the price is too low, the perception is that there's no value there, because why would you offer the same thing, the same value for a much, much lower price? You must not be offering the same thing. And, frankly, often we did get burned, and we do remember that. That takes us to the eighth law of trust, and that's that we often got burned by paying lower price and then realizing that it actually did have a lower value, and we don't want lower value. So this whole concept of we trust brands more, and because of that, there is a trust preference. We're going to buy from the brand more than we're going to buy from someone who's not the brand, even if the price is the same and everything else is the same. But also the fact that we're willing to pay a higher price for the brand. That thing hurts startups, and it puts startups in a much stronger in a much tougher position, that they have to offer a dramatically higher, better value to price ratio. I wanted to add one more thing, and that is everything I said about the trust that you have in brand would apply to distrust that you have in brand. And it's harder to recover from. When a brand is associated with distrust, it's going to be harder to recover from. And that would be the point where, by the way, a small, new, non-brand company can come in and take market share. They don't even have to lower their price. They're going to be trusted. It's not so much as that they're going to be trusted as it is they're still neutral in the level of trust we have in them. But the brand is in a disadvantage because we have a distrust in the brand. It's going to be hard to recover from. If you remember Toyota, they had issues I think it was, I don't remember which car it was, but they had their issues, and it was hard for them to recover. They did recover from it, but it took longer than if nobody knew them. So distrust associated with a brand can hurt as well. And sometimes it's just what we think about a brand, and a brand can be pigeonholed into a certain position. I remember when Walmart opened their store, their mega store in West Plano, that's considered a high-end environment with higher income people living there. And they said that this is going to be a high-end Walmart store. It's going to be the first one in the country. They're going to have $500 bottles of wine. They're going to have diamond jewelry and so on. But it's nobody's going to go home and say, I bought a $500 bottle of wine from a Walmart, or here, will you marry me with this engagement ring, $15,000 engagement ring that I bought at Walmart? So your brand also entrenches you in a certain position. And of course, the worst part is that it can happen with distrust. And it takes me back to the what you do part of the relative trust model builds over time and intimacy. It actually accelerates with time and intimacy, but it accelerates either trust or distrust. So the more time we spend with the brand, the more intimate we are with the brand, And if we start by distrusting them, this might actually entrench that distrust. We are reaching the end. Let me summarize it. We trust brands more than we trust non-brands. If you went to that pharmacy and you saw Tylenol next to another medication that's a generic medication that seems to be the same thing at a much lower price, you're still more likely to choose the brand name. So we trust brands more than we trust non-brands. Because of that, we're more likely to choose them. That's our trust preference. Because of that, we're more willing to pay a premium, a higher price. That's the trust premium. We do that because we believe in several things, such as we get what you paid for. There is no such thing as a free lunch. And nobody ever got fired for choosing IBM and things like that. Why does it happen? Well, first of all, it's because there is a higher likelihood for stronger transferable trust, either quality transferable trust through people we know who are more likely to recommend the brand, or quantitative through a lot of reviews that the non-brand doesn't have. Factors, again, affect that premium are the consequences and the cost that it actually plays in our budget. Is it significant? The trust. Why do we trust the brand? Another reason is the time that we spent with them. We have known them for a while, not so much with the non-brand. The intimacy, because they advertised and marketed to us. We've heard the name and some of the other components, but those are the main ones. So this is why we trust brands more than we trust non-brands and are even willing to pay a premium. That's it for today. May trust be with you. This was The Trust Show. What would you like to know about trust and trustworthiness? Let me know and I'll answer it in a future episode. I would love to hear from you. Email me at yoram@thetrustshow.com. If you like this episode, subscribe to the show so you will automatically get notified when I release a new episode. Rate it. Write a review for this podcast because those ratings help not only you, but also others looking for podcasts just like this. If you're looking for more resources to learn about how to build trust, be trusted, or know who to trust, look up my workshops, online courses, books, or go to my website, trusthabits.com. And remember that the answer to these two questions will have the biggest impact on your personal and professional success or failure. Can I trust you? And can you trust me? Thank you for listening or watching The Trust Show.